Hi, Bob Beechell again with another video on using R and RStudio. Now this one I'm going to be looking at what's called RMarkdown. Now this is a feature in RStudio and R which enables you to create quite complex documents or presentations which involve both formatting via Markdown syntax and also the inclusion of R code, which is evaluated and printed. So you can include tables and charts and the results of R computations directly within the document. So it's a very good way of creating journal articles and web pages and so on. So in order to create R Markdown documents, you have to use the R Markdown package. So obviously if you don't have that installed, you would need to download that and install it first off. Then to create a document, you go to File, New File, and choose R Markdown. You're then asked to give the document a title, so I'll just call this here Test. Give the author's name, I'll just leave that as me for the moment, and then choose the default output format where you can create HTML documents, web pages, or PDFs, or Word documents. Now if you want to create Word documents, you're going to need Word installed, but for the other two, HTML and PDF, RStudio takes care of everything. Now in fact, as it says here, it's best to do the authoring of the document in HTML because you can then still output a PDF if you wish, as you'll see. So I'm going to click OK, and what that then does is open up a default document or a default template which you can then edit to create your own document. Now, the advantage of this template is it illustrates the basic features of R Markdown. Essentially it's divided into two sections. The first section here between the hyphens here, the lines, is the metadata section where you can indicate using key value pairs various options. As you can see, you've already got the title and author that I put in. You can change those if you wish. Here's the current date. Again, obviously you can change that. And then you have an indication of the output that you want the document to take once it's rendered. And it's by default it's HTML as we chose. If you want PDF, then you'd need to include output PDF document. You don't have to type that in fact, because as you'll see, once you actually render it as a PDF, that will be included. Now under output, you can also include other sub-options, such as indicating that you want a table of contents, that you want to specify a particular size for the charts that you're going to include, and so on. For more information on using R Markdown, then the best thing to look at is the actual R Markdown website, and the address here is in fact included here. So I'll just click command click on that, control click if you're in Windows to load it. As you can see, so the address here is rmarkdown.rstudio.com. This contains all the information that you need to use R Markdown. The best thing to look at if you're new to it is the Getting Started section, which takes you through all the various elements and the features of R Markdown that you can include. I'll be going through the basics here so that you can create decent documents, but there's more to it than I can cover in this video. So here you'll find more information. If you want really detailed information on R Markdown, then there is a standard book, and the link is here, which is called R Markdown, the Definitive Guide, so which tells you exactly that it will cover everything you need to know. So if you want more detailed information, you can look at that. So the second section of the document, you've got the first section here, the metadata. The second section contains the actual document itself, which will be rendered, which will be exported. Now this can contain three elements. Firstly, text together with Markdown syntax, Markdown codes to create the formatting. Secondly, R code, which can be included, and the results, the code itself will be run and the result produced. And thirdly, which is not here as yet, but I'll show how to do it, you can include equations by using Latex. Now, if you're not familiar with Markdown, it's a simple formatting, as it says here, simple formatting syntax for authoring HTML, PDF, and MS Word documents. All you do, if you want to indicate certain formatting, is use little text characters, basically. For example, to indicate that you want a particular heading, you use a hash at different levels. Here we've got 2 hash, which means this will be outputted, this will be formatted as a heading of size 2. If you wanted it bigger, heading size 1, just use 1 hash. Want it smaller, 3 hash, and so on. If you want to make something bold in the document that you export, you put double asterisks either side of it. If you want italic, just single asterisks. If you want to include links, you can do that too. You can also include images, you can create tables, do bulleted lists, and so on. All the standard formatting features that you'd include in a web document or in a PDF. Now, there's lots of information about Markdown on the web, but the actual syntax is really quite straightforward. In fact, there's a very nice little quick reference here under the help system. So if I go to that, Markdown quick reference, it opens up in the help view, and this shows you all the basic codes, the syntax that can be used. As I said here, single asterisk either side give you italic, double asterisk bold. Those are the headers I mentioned. If you want to do a simple unordered, a bulleted list, just use asterisks. Ordered list, just need a number and a full stop, a period. Now, this is what you actually type into your document, but of course when it's exported and rendered, the exporter, the renderer, knows that this means you want a list, and it will create a list for you. These will be turned into bullets and so on. This is how you put a link in. In square brackets, you indicate the phrase that's going to be highlighted, that's going to be the link, and in normal brackets here, you put the actual link itself, the URL. This is how you put images in. You can put block quotes. Now this is all standard Markdown, which is used in a number of areas, but because this is RMarkdown, the special thing about it that makes it very useful is that you can also include R code blocks like this, where you, in between these 2 lines here, that one there, you put any R code that you wish. You could use any standard R code. And that R code, when you render the document, will be evaluated and, as it says, printed. You can either have the code and the results showing in your document, or just the results, or not, in some cases, neither. Code can also be in line as well. And as I say, you can use Latex to create math formulas and mathematical equations. So let's have a look at what would happen if I format this particular document here, or rather if I export it. Now, in order to do that, you use the knit button here. This actually uses a package called knit, and the packages, this package and the others you need, are, I believe, automatically installed when you install our Markdown. If not, you'll find that when you press this button for the first time, any packages that are missing that it needs, it will enable you to download them. And then they're ready from then on. Now, you'll see there are 3 options here corresponding to the various documents, HTML, PDF, and Word. If you simply click button, it will use the one that you used previously, now, beginning with HTML. So if I click this button here, this document is going to be rendered as a web page. Where you have Markdown code, then the correct formatting will be applied, a heading here, bold here, a link here, and so on. The R code will be run and the results plotted, shown, unless you tell it not to. In fact, as you can see here in the first, in this section here, which is in the first line, notice that for a R block, it's put between these two lines here. You always have R, then you can indicate a chunk label, as it's called, but that's optional, and then further options, and they're separated by commas. Include equals false tells it not to show either the code or the results. Echo equals false tells it just to show the results, not the actual R code. So here, where we haven't got either of those, you will see both the code, summary cars, and the results of running that line, which will be a summary of the car data in the car in cars. Now, in fact, if you want to check that what's going to be output is what you want before you run the document, you can simply press this little arrow here that says run current chunk. That will run it, run the R code, and show you the results. So here, if I want to check that the plot is as I want it to be, we can run it, and there it is. So that's a nice feature that enables you to check that things are going to appear as you expect them. This section here, which include equals false, so you won't see either the code or the results, that's always included here, and it's called setup because that's precisely what it is. This section here is best used to include code, R code, which you don't want to actually see, nor do you want to see the results. That would include such things as library commands to load up the necessary packages that you need for the code further on, and code to import the data that is also needed later on. The point is that although include equals false stops the results and the code from appearing, it doesn't mean that the code is not run. It is, and any objects or that's created or data that's imported will be available further down. Okay, so let's run this. Let's export this document. Let's knit it into an HTML file. Now, the first time you run the knit command on a new document, you will actually have to save it first before it actually does it. So it's saved as a RMarkdown, a .rmd file. So I'm going to save this on my desktop here and simply call it test. When I click save, it will create that file, test.rmd, and then it will also create a file called test.html, which it will then display. So as you can see, it's showing this document, which is now on my desktop, this HTML document. And as you can see, it's done as expected. It's where the Markdown code is included. It's applied the appropriate formatting for headings, for bold, for links here. And where there was our code, our code chunks, it's run the code, and if we haven't specified it not to, it's displayed both the code and the results. So here, of course, we didn't put include equals false or echo equals false, so it showed both the code and the results. Here, echo equals false means just show the results, the plot, because I don't want to see this line. So you get a nice HTML document here, which obviously you can open in a separate browser if you wish. This is the inbuilt browser in RStudio. Let's now knit this file, let's export this file as a PDF. So going to the knit option here and choosing knit to PDF, it processes the file. it creates a document called test.pdf, which will be on the desktop, of course, where I previously saved the RMD file. It goes in the same directory, the same folders where you put that file originally. And then it displays the PDF in its own built-in PDF viewer. And as you can see, it's created a nice PDF again, using the Markdown syntax to apply the formatting, headings, bold, links, and again, the same with the R code. So as you can see, it's very easy to create complex documents with formatting and code and charts and tables within RStudio using RMarkdown. Now, if you want to change some of the way the document, the PDF or the HTML document is displayed, you can include additional options here in the output section. So one thing that you might want to do, and by the way, you can find more about these options by, of course, going to either the definitive guide or which gives you all of them, or looking on here on the getting started section. So a common thing you might want to do in both a HTML file and a PDF is to create a table of contents. Now to do that, you simply add the option here as a sub-option of HTML or PDF, TOC:"true". So let me apply that to the PDF document. Now, in fact, if you do need to delete the word default. Notice, by the way, that when I knitted it as a PDF, it included this additional output option, which I didn't need to type that myself, but I do need to delete the word default and then add the TOC:"true". Similarly, for the HTML document, now let me knit the document again. Now, the last time I ran this, I did a PDF, so it should this time give me a PDF again. There we go. And as you can see, it's now given me a table of contents. It's actually included the heading for that. And these contents are clickable. They are linked. It's not just the text, they are actual links. So if I click that, it takes me to including plots. That takes me to our Markdown, so that's very neat. Okay, so now I'll render the document as an HTML document, HTML page to show the table of contents. So just one point, by the way, here, do make sure that when you put this TOC:"true" statement, you leave a space here between the colon and the word true. If you don't, which I didn't do initially, you'll get an error, it won't work. So that's very important. And that will apply to the other options you can put under here. So now, since I knitted last time a PDF, I'll need to go into here and choose knit to HTML. That will give me the HTML document. As you can see, we've got a nice table of content here with clickable links. Now, in fact, a neat thing to do with an HTML document is to have the table of contents in a side panel rather than at the top there, but that's particularly useful if you've got quite a long document. Now, you can easily do that by adding another option here, which is TOC_float, which you then set to true. So again, notice the space there. So let me knit that. Now I knitted a HTML, so I should be able to do this again. And there we are. As you can see, this is very neat. Puts the table of contents and the links in a side panel here, so you can quickly choose them. That's particularly useful if you had a very long document, lots of headings, and a big table of contents. Okay, there are some other options here which I'll mention later on. What I want to look at in more detail now is how to add our code chunks, which of course is in many ways the key feature of our Markdown, the ability to put our code in as we've seen here and to have the results evaluated and printed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to include some code to create a nice chart, a graph using ggplot2, which of course has become very much the standard way of creating charts. I've covered this of course in detail in a couple of previous videos. So before I actually put the code in for that, I'm going to include in here a couple of lines to first of all load up ggplot2, or rather the tidyverse, which includes that, and then import some data so that I can then use that data with ggplot2 to create a graph down here. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the best place to put code like that, like loading packages or importing data, because you don't want that obviously to be that code to be seen, of course, but you want it to run and therefore the results to be available. So I've already created some code here to save time, so I'll paste this in. Okay, as you can see, so I'm loading the tidyverse into memory with the library command, and then I'm using the read_csv command from the tidyverse to read this data from a CSV file into a tibble. So that data will now be available. So what I'm now going to do is to add the code down here that will create the graph. Now, as we've seen, our code goes in between these two lines here. You don't have to type those in, you can do, but there's a very simple way, and that's to insert an R code chunk from here. So click the down arrow and insert R. As you can see, it puts the basic starting syntax in for you. Now, I want to give this a chunk label. I'll just simply call it my graph. This is optional, but you might want to do it. Comma, because you must separate options with commas. Now, I don't want the code to be seen, just the results. So that means, of course, I need to put echo equals false. Notice how RStudio is very nicely using code completion to make it easy. Now, one other thing you can put if you're drawing a chart is a caption, and you can do that with the option fig.cap. So it's fig.cap, there it is, equals, and of course some captions. So that data shows the savings ratio, if I remember correctly. And the graph I'm going to draw, that is. So let me put that. I use this in the one of the actual videos I did on ggplot2. So that's going to put a caption underneath. Okay, there are other options you can put in as well, which I say you can find all of those in the documentation. So let me now add the code to create the graph. So I'm just going to put a very simple ggplot2 piece of code. So if you know ggplot, if you've followed my videos, you'll see that this is the basic code you have to put in. You say ggplot, the tibble where the data is, then AES for aesthetics, and the X variable, the Y variable, and then tell it what kind of graph you want, in this case a line graph. So this should now print create a nice simple chart. I haven't added, of course, all the code you need for headings and axis labels and so on, but that could be done. If I click this, it should run the code. There we go. Notice that it also ran the code up above, which was required. Here you can see that it's in the console. So I didn't need to click this here. And as you can see, that it's done the graph nicely. That's what I'm going to get. Obviously, I say if I want to include a heading and axis label and so on, I just need to put those in the code. So as you can see, that's very neat. we can use the nice graphics that ggplot2 creates into our document very easily. So let me knit this now as a, I think it's HTML I did last time, didn't I? So let's have a look. Yep, there we go. So here you can see the caption. It's not particularly great. There are probably some things you can do to make that look better, perhaps put it, center it, and so on. It actually looks rather better in the PDF, so let me knit that. So there's my PDF now, with my graph, and as you can see, that does by default appear much better. It's centered, and in fact it even calls it figure 1. So in fact, if you put another graph in later on, that would appear automatically as figure 2 and figure 3 and so on. Now you can change the size of these graphs and the margins and the font and that, which I'll come to just shortly, because at the moment this font is a little bit small. Okay, so that's how to put our code in. Let me now just show you how you can put, very briefly, how you can put mathematical equations in using LaTeX. Now, if you're not familiar with LaTeX, LaTeX itself is a formatting language, rather like RMarkdown, which can be used to create documents like RMarkdown does, with formatting of the text and including tables and charts and graphs and so on. In some ways it's an alternative to using RMarkdown, but one of the best features of LaTeX is its ability for you to put in mathematical notation, mathematical equations, very, very complex ones if necessary, and in fact is very much the standard way of doing this in journal articles. So now RMarkdown is able to interpret this LaTeX code, in particular the mathematical code, the code for mathematical equations. So I want to give you a simple example of that. Now, if you want to know more about how to do that, and again, it's simply a matter of learning what the syntax is, then I recommend, there are a number of sources on this, including you can get documentation from the LaTeX site itself, but one of the ones which I found particularly useful is a document created by Rob Heinemann, who is one of the authors of the forecast package that I've used before. If you go to his blog and go in particular to this page here, where he gives details of a workshop he did on LaTeX in 2008. But what I'm interested in here is the notes that he created, the PDF, which you can find here, which gives a very nice, brief and succinct introduction to LaTeX. So if you wanted to know about LaTeX fully, then you can get it here. But I'm only interested in the section here on putting mathematics in, which is on page 10. So scrolling to that, eventually, there we go. Here he shows how to, most of the key syntax, the key code that you need to put, to format and create equations, which RMarkdown will then interpret using its built-in LaTeX interpreter and format them very nicely for you. As you can see, most of these LaTeX codes involve a backslash and then some appropriate short word, like, as you can see, for integral, it's backslash integer, for a fraction, backslash frac, and then you put, for example, a fraction here, it's backslash frac, and then in curly brackets, in the first set of curly brackets, what's on in the numerator, and then a second set of curly brackets with the denominator. Greek letters are backslash alpha for alpha, / beta for beta, and so on, obviously. If you want a square root sign, you put / sqrt, and then again in curly brackets, the figure that's within the square root sign. So it's just a matter of learning these. Here's a good one if you want to put a bar over something. / bar. There are other things that he shows here. You could even put matrices. Now notice it says here that use, if you want inline mathematics, it's between $signs. Now that's the same for RMarkdown. If you want to put equations in a block, then in fact, as we saw, if I go back to the Markdown reference, so inline equations is the same between $signs for what it calls a display equation, a separate paragraph of or block of equations of maths, then in between double $signs, which is different from LaTeX itself. So let me give a very simple illustration of this. So I'm going to put a little equation in, which the sort of thing you're putting if you're putting down, if you're doing regression analysis and you want to specify the model, the equation that you're going to estimate. Again, I've pre-prepared this so I can quickly paste it in. There we go. So as you can see, I put it between these $signs, double $signs here. Now, if you go back to the LaTeX thing here, you'll see that when you use an underscore like that, that's how you put a subscript in. If you want a superscript, then you put that little inverted V, which is above the number 6 on your keyboard. If you want Greek letters, beta, for example, / rather beta. So I've used those here. So that's going to be SAV. And notice that below you can see automatically what it's going to look like, which is useful. So you don't have to knit the document and see what it is and then find it's wrong. You can check it here. So as you can see, I've used underscores here to give me the subscripts. I've used / beta for the betas, epsilon. So that's very simple. I haven't put any fractions or integrals in, but again, using the syntax and the examples that are given to you here, I think you'll be able to work those out. For example, here's the standard formula for the roots of a quadratic equation. You should be able to see how that has been put in here. Obviously, to work this out, to know how to do this yourself, you're going to have to look at this and study it, but it's relatively straightforward. So the nice thing is that RMarkdown accepts these LaTeX, this LaTeX code and puts in nice equations. So let's just knit that document again, see what it looks like. I think we're on a PDF. Yes, it's PDF at the moment. So that will have now put that equation in. Say the font size is a little small at the moment, so I'm going to show how to increase that. But now let me just knit it as an HTML just to show that. There we go, that's rather better, rather bigger. So you can do this in both PDF and HTML and web pages. Okay, so one final thing I just want to show here, and that's how, in fact, we can change the formatting of a PDF document. As we saw with the default, it seemed to me that the font size was a little small. So I'm going to show how you can increase that, and also how you can change the margins if you want the margins to be smaller or larger, and also how you can specify the document size, the paper size that you want. So, for example, A4 or letter. Now you can do that by adding additional metadata code here, and although this is going to affect the PDF document, you don't actually put it under as with the TOC here under PDF. You put it at this sub level. You put it at the top level. So here I'm going to put it here from from the top level rather than a sub, rather than indented. So let me put in the code that I've created. So these are the options. If you want to specify the margins, you use geometry, colon space, of course, and then margin equals, and you specify in inches. You can maybe specify also in centimeters, but I'm using inches here. Font size. Now the default font size, I believe, is 10 point, but you can also specify either 11 or 12. No, those are the only ones as far as I can see, 10, 11 or 12 point. If you try anything above 12 point, it doesn't seem to, it simply defaults back to 10. And if you want to specify the paper, then it's this class option option here. And you could put other options there, which again I think one of them would be letter. You can find these in the documentation. So let's run this now as a PDF. And there. You can see that the text now, the font size is a little bit bigger than before. Not much, of course, if the default was 10 point, this is 12 point, but I find this a little bit better. And certainly if you look at the document I'm on the Mac here, so if you look at it in preview, or if you're on, if you look at it Adobe Reader on Windows, you'll find it looks much better. So the margins are wider now. I've formatted it deliberately for A4 paper, and I've also increased the font size. Now obviously there are other formatting options you can include. Again, if you want information on those, much more information, then of course go to the documentation here about output formats. In fact, this has now got links which take you directly to the book of the definitive guides. If you click here on HTML document, you can see it actually takes me to the relevant section in the RMarkdown text. Okay, so I hope that's helped you, that's shown you how you can use RMarkdown in RStudio to write essays, to write journal articles, to write any other documents which you need to, where you want to include formatting, but also the results of our code.